This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today is September 12th, 2023. Thank you for joining us. We're here on thetruthcentral.com every weekday. Please pass the word, like the show, let everybody know we're doing it again. I've decided not to be retired. There's too much going on, and it's at too critical a point of time. So I'm back. We're commentating on the news with this show, and we're going to start with, I think, with one of the more important stories. This involves Iran. I've been writing about Iran for now years. My first book on Iran was the Atomic Iran, which I wrote in 2006, predicting that Iran would get nuclear weapons and would attack Israel, which could be the start of a regional, if not a international thermonuclear war. And I think, unfortunately, we're on the brink of that right now. This deal that the Biden administration has negotiated essentially concedes to Iran the ability to continue with its aggression and terrorism, its ability to develop nuclear weapons. There's no stopping Iran at this point. That we've given too many concessions and too much money. Now we're going to swap prisoners. There's 5 Americans held, and then we're going to swap them for some Iranians that we're holding. But the underlying importance of this deal is the freeing up of sanctions, the allowing the Iranian economy to engage again, which will get them a flow of money, which they will use for terrorism and they will use for developing nuclear weapons. Now, Iran has also just been invited to join the BRICS nations. There's the coalition of nations, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And so when you get Russia and China together and Iran joins the group, now you've got 3 of the most intensely anti-American countries in the world, largely united and having the military ability to threaten our interests in Israel and in the United States. Now, I feel there's certain biblical reasons why Israel is extremely important, that the decision of Harry Truman to allow the state of Israel to be created in 1948 was a biblical decision because it meant the return of the Jews to Jerusalem. And the Bible basically says once they're there, they will never leave. But if anyone's read Ezekiel, I think 37, 38, as I recall, you'll see what seems certainly like a exchange of nuclear weapons between Israel and Iran. It's certainly been interpreted that way. I've been writing about this for years, and God intervenes and Israel is saved. But it's insanity to think that these Iranians who have proclaimed death to Israel now for decades are suddenly going to relent and allow Israel to exist if they have nuclear weapons. When I wrote Atomic Iran, I said, terrorists don't stockpile weapons. When they get them, they use them. And when Iran has sufficient nuclear weapons that it feels like it can succeed, I have no doubt that they will begin thinking about using them and then using them. So we're headed here for a very, very dangerous scenario where the intensity of the conflicts in Israel are ramping up, and the pressure to destroy Israel is gaining force. The United Nations clearly supports the Palestinians. There's movements now to have the Gaza Strip and the West Bank controlled by forces that are opposed to Israel. Largely, Hamas will be taking over much of those areas, supported by Iran. So again, the Middle East is going to be something I'll probably be writing about more, but it's going to be extremely dangerous. I'm going to cover one more story for a minute here. Really, this one is also equally important. What is happening now is that the FDA decided yesterday what they're going to do is to approve on this emergency basis of these new vaccines that they're coming out with for the variants that we're talking about hitting us again in October and through the end of the year and into the winter. So the Food and Drug Administration gave the green light on Monday, yesterday, for the updated COVID-19 vaccines from Moderna, Pfizer, BioNTech, as hospitalizations are rising for COVID. It's the same scenario we've seen before. We've seen this play, and they're going to do it again. So the vaccine manufacturers have been saying that testing shows their vaccines are effective against this EG.5, the current dominant strain in the United States. So they're going to say we have these stronger mutations, and evidently we're going to see another wave of people getting sick with COVID. Now, the emergency waiving the testing to be done on these drugs, giving them emergency authorization, means that they have not determined these vaccines are safe. These usually take years and go through a lot of testing before they are released to the public. The FDA is not doing that. And with the evidence already out there, which is as extensive as it is, that these vaccinations are themselves dangerous, producing blood clots, cardiovascular problems. We're seeing people with sudden deaths, young people keeling over, athletes keeling over. I mean, this is, again, one of the reasons I can't be retired. I'm going back into this. I'm going to create, I've got telemedicine companies coming along now, and I'm going to launch them. And this is going to be another major effort here to suppress ivermectin. We covered the story yesterday. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, ruled that the FDA overstepped its bounds by saying and demeaning and trying to discourage people from using ivermectin. Now, that doesn't mean the FDA has approved ivermectin for COVID, but it means the court saying that doctors can off-label prescribe ivermectin, and it's within their authority. It was not within the authority of the FDA to try to get people not to use ivermectin. Obviously, the motivation here is that there's billions of dollars to be made on vaccines, and ivermectin is a very inexpensive prescription, just like hydroxychloroquine. But I believe we'll see another effort to deny these medications to the American public. Now, what you're finding here, and you've got to realize that the people who are in control right now, the governments, the United States included, and Biden obviously is not mentally capable of running the government. It sure certainly seems like it's Obama in the backstage running the government again with his third term. If he runs Michelle for president, he'll have his fourth term. That's what the plan is. These people are intentionally want to shut down society. They want to destroy the middle class. They're depopulationists. If you'll read my book on the truth about energy, global warming, and climate change, and Chris would just show that, it starts out by saying that this entire movement began with depopulation, that it was all to find a way that there's too many people. We were using up the resources of the earth. We've got to get rid of all these people. And it's insanity. We're in an interglacial warming period. The earth right now is abundant in carbon dioxide, but it is much less than it was 600 million years ago. And we are not going to destroy the planet with carbon dioxide. It is not the turning knob of the earth's temperature. But the point is, it's again designed to destroy, to negate. This is the neo-Marxism. This is the cultural Maoism. It's the hate America. And when you get a population that is dumbed down, that doesn't know science, this is remarkably easy to get them to believe some kind of a phenomenon or this strange idea, popular delusion, which has almost mass hypnosis effects. People believe it, even though it scientifically is not true. So here we're coming out with another COVID exercise, and I think we're going to talk about lockdowns. We'll probably go through the whole show all over again. It may be at a lower level, and I'm hoping people this time around will wake up and realize that the masks don't work, that the isolation and the lockdowns don't work, These are social control mechanisms. As people get into them and submit to them, then those who want to destroy populations will know that they're in control and they can't be stopped. That's the greatest fear I have, is that they are going to get so powerful that when the nuclear war, even if it killed billions of people, would be okay. Jane Goodall, who was, the woman who's worked with the apes, the chimpanzees, and the like, she's done some very interesting and good work. She says we'd be better off with 500 million people. Well, that's going back to the Middle Ages. It means we have to kill 3/4 or more of all the people. With 8 billion people on the planet, we go back to 500,000. I have 500 million. I mean, this woman is, if we go down those kind of numbers, we're going to be experiencing a death of human beings on a scale that was unimaginable until these kinds of weapons have been developed and are in the hands now of people who think there's too many people on Earth. Chris, do you want to comment on this?
And of course, who's to say who which people will be outside that 500 million people who will be left in a society that the depopulationists want? Who would be those people? That's probably why you have China and the U.S. establishing social credit scores, and of course other Western nations as well.
It's headed that way. Let's just continue. Germany has passed now this controversial green heating law, and it's again frightening. Germany closed down its nuclear power plants, which would reduce carbon dioxide emissions, if that's really what they wanted to do dramatically, just get those plants working again. Nuclear power plants don't emit carbon dioxide. So they've had 6 months of debate, and the German left-wing government has passed this controversial green heating bill. It's called the Building Energy Act. And it's going to cost $1 trillion over the next 20 years. What it does is it takes a nation, Germany's already struggling with inflation, with skyrocketing energy costs. They're going into winter again. This would require the installation of expensive heating systems that have been rejected by the majority of the population. People don't like them because they are inefficient. They use renewable fuels. So the mandates, Germans with older heating systems have to replace them within a definite period of time, although the final bill passed watered down some of the requirements, but yet it's going to cost $1 trillion to do all this replacement. Now, Germans have a lot of their savings, more than half of their savings, in their homes. For many seniors, their homes with older heating systems are now going to take a hit to their value due to the law, because they will have to replace those heating systems. They've got to make costly upgrades, usually in the form of a heat pump, associated costs of making it work efficiently inside a building to meet these green standards. So in many old buildings that were built before the first thermal insulation regulations came into force in 1979, these buildings are not energy efficient. Older homes are not energy efficient. Now, this is going to essentially wipe out the German middle class. Germany is already deindustrializing. The cost of energy in Germany is too high. Germany has been hit by the Russian cutoff of natural gas because of the Ukraine war. I mean, these things are a disaster waiting to happen. One on top of the other builds a perfect storm. A perfect storm means, the storm comes, and usually it's a fairly mild storm or a moderate storm, but when all the circumstances pile together and you get hurricane-like winds and you get tremendous amounts of rain and you get cold or any kind of temperature variations, I mean, the seas can go so violent that it's a perfect storm. And that's going to last for a while. And it's very destructive. It's they're natural on Earth. They occur naturally. It's not carbon dioxide that causes it. It's been going on for centuries. and it has nothing to do with human beings. The Earth does not regulate its temperature to make us happy. The Earth regulates its temperature to distribute heat from the sun to the poles and the upper atmosphere. It's a complicated system, and carbon dioxide plays a minor role in it. But these governments are passing laws, like here in the United States with the electric vehicles. These are designed to make energy more expensive. Energy more expensive, the hard left. I'm talking about the neo-Marxists who want to destroy America, the cultural Maoists, and this is my next book. I'm trying to warn everyone what's coming. And not that I want to, but it's better to be prepared. And the neo-Marxism, the woke, really have no use for the middle class. They don't want debate because they believe that they have imagined the perfect society. And as such, they can posit it. In their perfect society, there's no borders, genders, or whatever you want them to be. It is divisive. It's reintroducing racism because now suddenly the white people are demonized. And if you're white, you can't do this. If you're white, can't do that. We've got white privilege. And it's a hating of races, which is not what Martin Luther King had in mind by any means. He had a colored blindness in mind. Now, all of this energy nonsense would be tolerable if it had a basis in legitimate science. But the next story I want to cover is one that I think is equally important, which is the climate emergency as a hoax. Now, you've got 1,600 scientists, including 2 Nobel Prize winners, who signed a declaration that there is no climate emergency. Okay, so, and one of them has been very vocal. This Nobel laureate, John Clauser, has been in many broadcasts and trying to get the point out that climate change, all of this nonsense about global warming, have been based on scientific models that overemphasize the role of carbon dioxide and overemphasize the climate catastrophes, earthquakes, floods. Every time there's a flood, okay, so it's flooding in Libya, so climate change. We had a hot summer, climate change. Everything's climate change, no matter what happens. These climate models, there's no statistical evidence that global warming is intensifying hurricanes, floods, droughts, and such like natural disasters or making them more frequent. This was a report done by this Clintel organization. There is no climate emergency. I've been reporting on it repeatedly. Stephen Koonin, who was the former Undersecretary of Science for the U.S. Department of Energy, he wrote a book called Unsettled, what climate science tells us and what doesn't. And he's pointing out again that it's immoral to ask the developing world to cut down on its carbon emissions when so many in the world don't have access to electricity at all. China is using coal in massive amounts. China says it will reduce emissions, but it has no intention of doing so. And the Biden administration just appears unconcerned about the widespread poverty, the massive starvation that will be caused, and has begun to be caused, by the unavailability of cheap and reliable energy. And it's going to hit the underdeveloped nations first. It's going to hit Africa. It's going to hit South America. It's going to hit Asia. These are man-made problems. We get oil up to $100 a barrel again. I think oil could go to $200 a barrel. We've got OPEC cutting production in order to maintain the price. And Russia's along with that because Russia and OPEC are now merging in some ways. The invitation that went to Iran, which is also oil producing by the BRICS, went to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. You're getting a merger between the oil producing companies and the anti-American coalition, which also wants to de-dollarize. Now, not only is this climate emergency a hoax, but I think we're building for a possible October market crash. And I've written a book on this too. And I want you to get a free copy if you just go to our website and look at this book on the coming global crash. and the gold rush that's going to occur historically. Gold has typically doubled in price. 1970, whenever we have an economic downturn, gold in the 1971, when we were taken off the gold standard by Richard Nixon, gold was $35 an ounce. In the 1970s, early 80s, when Jimmy Carter, with the OPEC oil embargo, many listening to this were too young to remember it, but we had gold, the economy crashed, interest rates were up to 22%, try to contain the inflation. It was our first round of stagflation, which we're going to go through again. Gold went to $840 an ounce. In 2008, 2009, we had the crash of the subprime real estate market, and gold went to $2,000 an ounce. Gold could go to $4,000 an ounce. We have a credit crisis building. What's going to hit this fall is the realization that the home market is dead with 8% interest rates for 30-year fixed mortgages. Many commercial real estate buildings that are largely vacant are going to have to refinance. There's going to be billions of dollars of losses taken there. That will hit the collateralized mortgage obligations that into which these commercial loans are wrapped as securities. That will hurt the banks because the banks hold a lot of these securities. And again, it's the same kind of a perfect storm collapse that we saw in 2008, 2009, when institutions like Bear Stearns went away, Lehman Brothers. These have been classic institutions on Wall Street. We had to have bailouts of banks because banks were failing left and right, and it was international. Get a free copy of this book by calling the toll-free number at Swiss America, 800-519-6268. It's an easy-to-read book, How the Coming Global Crash Will Create an Historic Gold Rush. Dean Heskin, who's the head of Swiss America, and I wrote it. It's just published. Call, you get a free copy of it, 800-519-6268. I implore you to get a copy of this book and read it. Whether you buy gold or not, read the book and understand what's coming. Prepare yourselves, and I'm encouraging people who have IRAs and 401ks to get out of the stock market and to get some gold that will hold value when all your dollar-based investments begin to lose value. The Ukraine counteroffensive, which was so hyped by the press, has failed. It was predictably going to fail. There's no way that Ukraine, with Russia's ability to be in defensive positions, Ukraine had no chance at all of really attacking these positions. Thousands of Ukrainians have died. Ukraine has largely been turned into a wasteland. The cities have been bombarded. Russia's destroyed the infrastructure. These cities have no electricity. They have no energy of any kind, no gas. There's no lighting. There's no heat. People have abandoned these cities all across Ukraine. Russia controls the eastern part of, or the western part of, the eastern part of Ukraine next to Russia. The western part of Ukraine has always been more German. We're fighting with the neo-Nazi brigades who are backing Zelensky. Zelensky's attacking Christians. Putin's the one who's really actually saving Christians. And people are unaware of the amount of persecution of Christians that are going on rampantly in the world at this time. Ukraine is in a desperate situation because there's really no end game. The end game sensibly would be to negotiate with Russia and let Russia have the territory that's already claimed. The Donbass area is largely Russian people anyway. The Russian's a language spoken in that part of Ukraine for centuries. And Russia wants access to the Black Sea. So Sevastopol, southern Russia, Crimea, these are strategic positions that Russia is not going to give up. And if we continue to push NATO into Russia, right to the edge of Russia, which is what the Democrats want to do, and these leftists in the State Department are desperate to do it. Victoria Nuland, who's a neocon leftist, really wants war with Russia. They don't mind antagonizing Russia. The American left loved Russia from 1917 until the fall of the Berlin Wall because it was communist. Once it was no longer communist, the American left starts hating Russia, wants to go with Russia, to war with Russia. Well, it's insane because what's going to happen is that if we start sending these advanced weapons, F-16 fighters, advanced tanks, missiles that can travel larger distances and be GPS controlled, Russia will intensify the buffer area so these missiles can't reach into Russia, and Russia will escalate itself. If we can't win with troops, and NATO does not have the troops, NATO is not ready to fight a land war. They think they are, but they're not against Russia. If they try, the war will escalate very quickly into nuclear weapons. Russia's already moved nuclear weapons into Belarus. It's another reason I think we're on the verge of a nuclear war. I've not thought that in my lifetime, but I think it now. I think we're headed towards nuclear war. NATO is also going to prepare this large military exercise, and it's going to be up in the north. If we bring Finland into NATO and Ukraine, we've blocked Russia's access to the Black Sea, which is their way into the Atlantic Ocean from the south through the Mediterranean. If we get Finland in, we block Russia's access to the Baltic Sea, which is the access to the Atlantic North. Now, Russia is not going to tolerate this. In a sense, we've expanded NATO so far that they're beginning to call the Baltic Sea a NATO lake, because all the countries bordering it on the south are NATO countries. NATO is an alliance that was put together in the end of World War II when George Kennan, State Department, had the idea that we should contain the expansion of Russia into Europe. Russia at the end of World War II took over countries like Hungary and Poland and made them communist, Czechoslovakia. And that was partly the agreement that Franklin Roosevelt gave to Russia at the end of World War II. With the fall of the Berlin Wall, most of these states and the breakup of the Soviet Union were able to get back into some form of capitalism and reject communism. Now, the idea of containing Russia right now, Russia is not seeking expansion. Russia is seeking to preserve its territorial integrity and its access to the Atlantic. Like all major states, geopolitics, it wants buffer states. Same logic when we had the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 with Khrushchev putting nuclear weapons into Cuba. That's our sphere of influence. It's too close. And Jack Kennedy, as president, rightfully wanted to get those weapons out of there. Now, this type of aggressive NATO policy, running a military exercise, Russia will run a counter-military exercise. And Putin has been restrained. He has not advanced into more and more advanced weaponry. We're talking about sending cluster bombs and all these advanced weapons, which Russia is going to say, we're effectively at war with Russia right now through NATO. NATO's effectively at war with Russia because we're supplying Ukraine. If we stop giving Ukraine weapons and money, Ukraine would very quickly lose the war, and Russia would easily win. Now, the bottom line of all this money going is twofold. Number one, we think we can just print money because it's modern monetary theory, and we can pay back the interest with new money we just print. This is going to be massively inflationary, and the Federal Reserve is going to have to interest rate increase again. They can't control this. Take $100 and see what it buys at the grocery store. We're in a massive inflationary period, and the economy is slowing down. Take a look at the number of layoffs, big company layoffs, the numbers of bankruptcies, the failures of inner cities, cities like San Francisco. Rodeo Drive is a wasteland. It's a tragedy. That was a luxury shopping area. It was a very luxurious area. The Wilshire Boulevard right there, the hotel were landmarks. Now everything's boarded up and homeless everywhere, homelessness. Chicago, Baltimore, these failing cities. And as the economy slows down, these cities are going to die. They're going to, and we're pumping more and more immigrants into them. Now, these are formulas intended to destroy America. And Chris, we showed the new book that I'm coming out with, this, the neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. They intend to destroy in order to create their utopia. It's communism repeated again. Every time communism does this, millions of people die in famine. Millions of people die in war. We're headed towards the four horsemen of the apocalypse. We've got pestilence, COVID, war, Ukraine, economic disasters. We're going to see the potential here, which is shaping up, is so obvious when you put the pieces together. And the governments are lying. The governments are lying. They're lying about, and the last point here I wanted to make is the money, all this money going out, only the oligarchs, the Biden family, the corruption. And now you've got McCarthy and Mitch McConnell saying, well, we'd rather run against Biden. Maybe we should just not impeach him and run against him. Wait a minute. Biden's not going to be the candidate. The Democrats aren't going to go with Biden. They're going to get rid of Biden. It's probably going to be Michelle Obama that we're going to run against, that Trump is going to run against. But the point is, the Biden family is corrupt. The money that has been stolen is in the billions. And the money going to Ukraine that's been stolen is in billions. We just saw Ukraine arrest Kolomoisky. He was one of the major bankers behind Burisma, the company that employed Hunter Biden. The corruption is massive. And that's part of the difficulty, is that the woke will be the ones that are we're the vanguard of the revolution. They'll destroy America. And then they will be all killed. The globalists will have no use. Bill Gates will have no use of woke once he has gotten rid of 3/4 of the world's population and has all the Earth's resources to himself. Thinks this will be a great place without the people. These are fundamentally psychotic ideas, and combined with schizophrenia. It's an extremely dangerous time in American history. And Chris, any comments finally before we wrap up today?
Well, back to what you were saying about NATO, there was a time where NATO was a defensive group, a defensive organization, one to defend us against the Warsaw Pact behind the Iron Curtain in case there would ever be a huge war after World War II because
Right.
of communist Soviet Union.
Correct.
After the Soviet Union broke down, apparently there was nothing to do for 9 years for NATO. Winds up, Putin gets into power. He becomes the major boogeyman. I'm no fan of Putin at this point, but since when did NATO become an offensive organization where they want to recruit nations and try to stick them in, as you said, to kind of isolate Russia? It was supposed to be a defensive group, not an offensive group.
I agree. We're going to wrap up today. I'm traveling this week. I'll be back in my office next week, and we'll continue broadcasting every weekday this week. I've never seen at times more desperate than this. And I'm imploring people that one of the major reasons we're in this situation is because we've abandoned God. And I'm encouraging people to join me in getting down on my knees and asking God for forgiveness that we've allowed God to be taken out of our schools and public squares. Can't pray. People have to apologize about praying. News agencies don't recognize it when athletes are praying. They want to forbid praying in sports. We've killed millions of babies in the womb. And sex is no longer considered a sacred act related to procreation. It's just whatever you want to be, have fun. Well, that's Marcuse. This is the Frankfurt School. It's 101 communism. In uninhibited sex is a way to destroy the family. It was intended to do this. And if we don't have the discipline of families, don't devote ourselves to raising children, we don't devote ourselves to education and returning to making sure our schools are teaching fundamental skills, we are at 2 Chronicles 7:14. We've got to implore God. I think as long as enough of us ask God's forgiveness, as long as God's in the game, this can all be turned around. But the hour is getting late. Dr. Jerome Corsi today is Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. We'll be back tomorrow, thetruthcentral.com. Please like us. Take a look at my Vital C. It's revitalized my hair. I'm not coloring it. The color came back into it. My Vital C is a remarkable product. Take a look at it. We'll have a telemedicine site there too. It's coming. Hopefully we'll be able to announce all this in October. Dr. Jerome Corsi will be back with thetruthcentral.com tomorrow. God bless.